The volcanic moon glowed red against the endless black of space. Rivers of molten rock flowed across its surface like veins of fire. Deep inside the largest mountain, in a cavern that had existed for 10,000 years, the Empire celebrated their most sacred event. The great hatching had begun. Massive eggs, each one taller than a human, began to crack open one by one. The shells were thick and covered in scales that shimmered like metal. Inside each egg was a dragon hatchling, born to become a warrior, a conqueror, a destroyer of worlds. Elder stood at the center of the cavern, his ancient red scales from 100 battles. He was the keeper of traditions, the voice of the old ways. His job was to judge each hatchling as it emerged from its shell. The first dragon broke free with a powerful roar. Its scales were deep crimson, its eyes burned gold, and flames already danced in its throat, nodded with approval. This one would lead fleets across the stars. The second hatchling was even larger, its wings spreading wide the moment it escaped its egg. Another worthy warrior for the Empire. One by one, the dragons emerged. Each one was strong. Each one was beautiful in the terrible way that weapons are beautiful. The watching from the edges of the cavern cheered and roared their approval. Then the last egg cracked open. Silence fell across the cavern like a cold wind. The hatchling that crawled out was small, too small. Its scales were pale, almost white, and they looked thin and brittle instead of thick and strong. Its wings hung limp at its sides, the membrane so thin that light passed through it. When it tried to roar, only a weak sound came out, like wind through broken stones. Elder walked slowly toward the creature. His massive footsteps echoed in the sudden quiet. He circled the hatchling, examining it from every angle. The small dragon looked up at him with eyes that were not the proper gold of a warrior. They were violet, deep and strange, filled with colors that seemed to shift and move like clouds in a storm. "Void touch," declared. His voice was hard and cold, cursed by the stars themselves. The other hissed and pulled back, as if the small hatchling carried a disease they might catch. Mothers pulled their newborn warriors closer. Fathers looked away in disgust. The small dragon did not understand what was happening. It only knew that everyone was afraid of it, and that made it afraid too. It tried to move toward the other hatchlings, seeking warmth, seeking family. But they snapped at it with their sharp teeth and drove it back. "What is your judgment?" asked one of the council members. Did not hesitate. The drift, cast it into the void between stars. Let the cold take what should never have been born. No one argued. No one spoke in the hatchling's defense. This was the way, and it had been the way for longer than any of them could remember. Weakness was not tolerated. Weakness was erased. To let a weak dragon live would be to insult their entire species. They placed the hatchling in a metal cage and carried it to an old cargo ship that was scheduled for disposal anyway. The ship was falling apart, its engines barely working, its life support failing. They put the cage in the cargo bay and sealed the doors. The small dragon watched through the bars as they left without looking back. It called out to them, but its voice was too weak to carry. It pressed its face against the cold metal, waiting for someone to return. No one did. The ship launched into space. Its course was set for nowhere, aimed at the empty dark between galaxies where nothing lived and nothing grew. The hatchling would die there, alone and forgotten, and they would never speak of it again. For 3 months, the ship drifted through the void. The hatchling, who had no name because no one had cared enough to give it one, survived longer than it should have. It found frozen water in broken pipes and licked it until its tongue went numb. It ate whatever scraps it could find in the cargo bay. It curled into the ball it could manage to save warmth as the ship grew colder and colder. But even its stubborn will to live could not last forever. By the end of the 3rd month, the hatchling lay still in the corner of its cage. Its breathing was so slow and shallow that it barely moved. Ice crystals had formed on its pale scales. Its violet eyes were closed, and it had stopped dreaming of warmth and family. It was waiting to die. Far across the galaxy, a small salvage ship called the Wandering Moon picked up a faint distress signal. The signal was old, weak, and came from a region of space that most ships avoided. There was nothing out there worth finding. But Park was not most captains. He was a man in his middle years, with hair at his temples and lines on his face that spoke of hard times and harder choices. He had been many things in his life: a soldier, a prisoner, a man without a home or a family. Now he flew a salvage ship with a small crew, picking through the garbage of space to make a living. "It's probably nothing," said his pilot. She was a sharp woman with quick eyes and a quicker temper. "That signal is months old. Whatever sent it is dead by now." "Probably," agreed, "but we should check anyway." Sighed but changed their course. She had learned long ago that arguing with the captain was a waste of time. He always did what he thought was right, even when it cost him. 3 days later, they found the cargo ship. It was dark and dead, drifting without power. Put on his space suit and went aboard alone. His flashlight cut through the darkness as he moved through empty hallways filled with floating debris. The cold bit through his suit and his breath fogged inside his helmet. He found the cargo bay and forced the door open. At first he thought it was empty. Then his light caught something in the corner, something pale, something curled up in a cage that had been designed to hold it prisoner. Walked closer, his boots making no sound in the vacuum. It was a dragon, a small one barely bigger than a dog. Its scales were white and covered in frost. It was not moving. Any smart person would have turned around and left. Dragons were the enemy. Dragons had burned human colonies during the border wars. Dragons had killed millions of his people. This creature, even small as it was, represented everything humanity had learned to hate and fear. But did not see an enemy. He saw a creature that had been thrown away by its own kind. A living thing that someone had decided was not worth saving. He knew what that felt like. He had felt it himself, long ago, when the people who should have protected him had turned their backs instead. He broke open the cage. The dragon was still breathing, barely, just the smallest movement of its chest. Took off his outer jacket, the one that kept him warm in the freezing ship. He wrapped it around the dragon carefully, lifting the small creature into his arms. It weighed almost nothing. "I've got you," he said quietly, even though the dragon could not hear him through the vacuum of space. "I've got you now." He carried the dragon back to the Wandering Moon, stared at him like he had lost his mind. Minu, their engineer, refused to even be in the same room, but did not care what they thought. He made a nest from blankets in a warm corner of the ship. He laid the dragon down gently and sat beside it through the long night, talking softly about nothing in particular, just so it would know that it was not alone anymore. Somewhere in the darkness of its fatting mind, the dragon heard a voice. It was not the harsh voice of the who had condemned it. It was something softer, something kind. For the first time since its birth, the small dragon felt safe. And slowly, impossibly, it began to heal. The crew of the Wandering Moon thought their captain had gone crazy. That was the only explanation that made sense to them. Why else would Park bring a dragon onto their ship? Why else would he spend his nights sitting beside its nest, feeding it, caring for it like it was a lost child instead of a monster? Made her feelings clear every chance she got. She had served in the human military during the border wars. She had seen what dragons could do. She had watched them burn entire cities from the sky, their fire so hot that stone itself melted like water. "It's going to kill us," she said one morning, standing in the doorway of the cargo bay where kept the dragon. "Maybe not today, maybe not next week, but one day it will grow strong enough and then we're all dead." Did not look up from the small creature in front of him. The dragon was still weak, but it was breathing easier now. Its pale scales had started to gain some color, shifting between white and silver depending on the light. "He's not going to hurt anyone," said. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You've already started thinking of it as a person." "Because he is one." Shook her head and walked away. She did not understand and did not expect her to. She had not seen what he had seen in that frozen cargo bay. She had not looked into those strange violet eyes and recognized the same loneliness that had lived inside his own heart for so many years. Minu, the ship's engineer, dealt with the situation by pretending it did not exist. He worked on the engines. He fixed broken systems. He did everything he could to stay busy and far away from the cargo bay. When he had to pass by, he walked quickly with his eyes straight ahead. Only spent time with the dragon. He searched through illegal databases to learn about biology. Dragons needed heat, so he adjusted the temperature in the cargo bay until it was almost uncomfortable for humans. Dragons needed specific minerals in their food, so he traded favors at stations to get what he needed. Dragons needed mental stimulation, so he talked to the creature for hours, telling it stories about Earth, about space, about his own life. The dragon listened. At first, thought it was just the sound of his voice that calmed the creature. But as days turned into weeks, he noticed something strange. The dragon's eyes would move to follow his words. Its head would tilt at certain parts of stories, as if it understood what was being said. One night 3 weeks after the rescue, was sitting beside the dragon's nest. He was tired from a long day of repairs, and his voice was growing hoarse from talking. He fell silent and leaned back against the wall, closing his eyes. A voice spoke inside his mind. "Why did you save me?" His eyes snapped open. The dragon was looking directly at him, its violet eyes glowing softly in the dim light. The voice had not been sound. It had simply appeared in his thoughts, clear and unmistakable. "You can talk," whispered. "I have always been able to think," the dragon replied. "But no one ever listened before. They decided I was nothing before I had the chance to prove what I could be." His heart ached at those words. He understood them too well. "I saved you because someone should have saved me once," he said. "A long time ago when I was young and alone and everyone had given up on me. No one came. I had to save myself. But I always wished someone had cared enough to try." The dragon was silent for a moment. Then it moved closer, pressing its head gently against his hand. "I do not know how to be a dragon," it said. "The others did not teach me. They only taught me that I was worthless." "Then I'll teach you how to be something else," said, "something better." From that night on, their bond grew stronger. Named the dragon, which in an old Earth language meant breath of life. The dragon accepted the name with something that felt almost like joy. No one had ever given him a name before. Names were for those who mattered, and the had decided he did not matter at all, but made him feel like he mattered. As weeks passed, his body continued to change in ways that surprised them both. His scales hardened, but not into the traditional red of warriors. Instead, they became silver and iridescent, shifting colors like the surface of a soap bubble. When light hit them at certain angles, they seemed to contain entire galaxies. His wings grew stronger too, though they remained thinner than a normal dragon's wings. They were almost transparent, like windows made of living crystal. When he spread them, light bent strangely around their edges. And then there was his fire. The first time breathed fire, he nearly destroyed the cargo bay. But it was not the orange flames of a normal dragon. It was white, pure white, and cold instead of hot. When it touched the metal wall, it did not burn. Instead, it cut through the metal like a blade through paper. "What was that?" shouted, running in after hearing the noise. Pulled back in fear, expecting anger, expecting punishment. Instead, just looked at the perfectly smooth cut in the wall and laughed. "Well," he said, "we're going to need to practice that somewhere safer." Stared at the damage, then at the dragon, then at her captain. For the first time, something other than fear crossed her face. There was curiosity there too, and maybe just a little bit of wonder. "That's not normal fire," she said slowly. "I do not think I am a normal dragon," replied. Jumped at the voice in her head. She looked at with wide eyes, realizing for the first time that this creature was not just an animal. It was intelligent, it was aware, and it was afraid of her just as much as she had been afraid of it. "Okay," she said after a long pause. "Okay, maybe I need to rethink some things." It was not friendship, not yet, but it was a beginning. As months passed, continued to grow and change. His body stretched longer, his wings wider, but the most dramatic changes happened inside his mind. The mutation that had made him weak in the eyes of the was actually something else entirely. His brain had developed differently, creating connections that no dragon had ever had before. He could sense things that others could not. He felt the pull of gravity from distant stars. He heard the whispers of cosmic radiation passing through the ship. He saw patterns in the chaos of space that others would call impossible. One night, he warned about an asteroid storm 12 hours before the ship's sensors detected it. Another time, he predicted that an engine part would fail 3 days before it actually broke. And once, in a moment that frightened even himself, he looked at a star through the ship's window and knew, with absolute certainty, that it would explode in exactly 427 years. "How do you know these things?" asked. Did not know how to explain it. "The universe speaks," he said finally. "I can hear it now. I do not think I could hear it before because I was too weak to listen, or maybe I could always hear it and that is why they called me cursed." The void touched, remembered. "Yes, they said the void had touched me and made me wrong, but I do not feel wrong anymore. I feel like I am finally becoming what I was always supposed to be." Looked at the dragon who had grown from a dying creature in his arms to something magnificent and strange. Was larger now, almost too big for the cargo bay. His silver scales gleamed with inner light. His violet eyes held depths that made feel like he was looking into infinity. But when looked at, there was no cold distance in those cosmic eyes. There was only warmth, only gratitude, only love. "You saved me," said. "Not just my body. You saved the part of me that they tried to kill. You taught me that being different is not the same as being worthless." Reached out and placed his hand on the dragon's great silver head. "You saved me too," he said quietly. "I had forgotten what it felt like to matter to someone, to be needed. You reminded me." They stood together in the cargo bay of a small salvage ship, drifting through the endless dark of space. A human and a dragon, a bond that should not exist. But it did exist, and it was strong, and it was about to change everything. Word spread through the dark corners of space like fire through dry grass. A human captain was traveling with not as a prisoner, not as an enemy, as a companion, as family. At first, no one believed it. The story sounded like a joke, or maybe a trap. Humans and dragons did not travel together. Humans and dragons killed each other. That was the way it had always been, and that was the way most people assumed it would always be. But then someone saw the wandering moon at a refueling station. They saw a silver dragon through the cargo bay window, and they saw a human standing beside it without fear. They took pictures. They recorded video. They shared it on the networks that connected criminals, smugglers, and bounty hunters across the galaxy. The bounty hunters came first. Was repairing a broken antenna on the outside of the ship when the first attack happened. 3 small fighters dropped out of faster-than-light travel and opened fire immediately. Their weapons tore into the wandering moon's shields, sending showers of sparks across the hull. Grabbed the controls and threw the ship into evasive maneuvers. Minyu ran to the engine room to boost power to the shields. Barely made it back inside before a laser blast passed through the space where he had been standing. "Who are they?" Minyu shouted through the communication system. "Bounty hunters," replied through gritted teeth. "Someone put a price on our heads or on the dragon's head, same thing now." In the cargo bay, felt the ship shake from weapons fire. He felt fear, but not for himself. He felt fear for and the others. They had protected him when he was weak. Now he was strong, and he would protect them in return. He reached out with his mind and touched the thoughts of the pilots attacking them. Their intentions were clear and simple. They wanted money. They did not care who got hurt. Had never tried to use his powers as a weapon before. He had spent months learning to control them, to understand them, but always gently, always carefully. Now there was no time for care. He pushed. In the lead fighter, the pilot suddenly lost all sense of direction. Up became down. Left became right. He panicked and pulled hard on his controls, sending his ship spinning away into the darkness. The second pilot found his targeting computer showing impossible readings, locking onto stars millions of light years away instead of the ship in front of him. The third pilot simply forgot why he was there. One moment he was attacking. The next moment he was sitting in his cockpit, confused, wondering how he had gotten so far from home. All three fighters retreated, their pilots too disoriented to continue the fight. On the wandering moon, the crew stared at each other in shock. "What just happened?" Minyu asked. "I happened," his voice echoed in all their minds. "I will not let anyone hurt you." Sat back in her pilot's chair and let out a long breath. She had spent years fearing dragons. She had trained to fight them, to hate them. But this dragon had just saved her life. "Maybe," she said slowly, "you're not so bad after all." But the bounty hunters were only the beginning. The attacks came more frequently after that. Word had spread that the dragon could be valuable. The Empire had not officially announced a bounty, but everyone knew they would pay well for the capture or proof of death of any dragon that had bonded with another species. It went against everything they believed. It was an insult to their entire civilization. The crew of the Wandering Moon survived attack after attack, sometimes confused the enemy minds, sometimes outflew them. Sometimes Minyu found clever ways to use the ship's systems to create distractions, and sometimes simply talked their way out of trouble, using his reputation as a man who had survived impossible situations before. But they all knew it could not last forever. The hunters were getting more determined, their weapons more powerful, and behind them all, watching and waiting, was the Empire itself. The Empire made its move at the space station Terminus 7. Terminus 7 was a neutral trading post, a place where all species could meet and do business without fighting. At least, that was the rule. They did not care about rules. Commander arrived with 30 warships. She was a legendary warrior who had burned 12 human colonies during the border wars. Her scales were deep red, almost black, and her eyes burned with the golden fire of a true. She had never known mercy. She did not plan to start now. Her fleet surrounded the station, blocking all escape routes. Then she sent a message that played on every screen in every room, across the entire station. "I am commander of the Empire. I know the human ship Wandering Moon is docked at this station. I know they carry an abomination, a dragon that has betrayed its own kind by bonding with lesser creatures. You will surrender this dragon to me immediately. If you do not, I will reduce this station to dust. You have 1 hour." Panic spread through Terminus 7. Thousands of people lived and worked on the station. They had families. They had lives. And now they were all in danger because of one small ship and the dragon it carried. The station's leaders came to within minutes. They were afraid, and their fear made them angry. "Give them what they want," one demanded. "This is not our fight." "Hand over the dragon," said another. "Why should we all die for a monster?" Looked at them calmly. He had faced death before. He had faced it many times. The fear in the eyes of these leaders did not move him. "No," he said simply. "You would let thousands die for one creature?" the first leader asked. "I would let thousands die for the principle that we do not abandon those who need us," replied. The moment we start handing people over because we're scared, we've already lost everything that matters. In the cargo bay, heard everything. He felt the weight of all those lives pressing down on his soul. He had never asked for anyone to protect him. He had never wanted to put others in danger, but was right. Giving in to fear would only lead to more fear. That would never stop taking if people kept giving. "I will face her," said through the mental link he shared with. "You don't have to do this alone." "I know, but I want to, I need to. They threw me away because they thought I was weak. It is time to show them what I have become." The cargo bay doors opened. Had grown large over the past months, but he was still smaller than a warship. He was still young, still learning the limits of his power. As he flew out into the cold vacuum of space, he looked tiny against the massive fleet that surrounded the station. Commander watched him approach on her. She laughed at the sight. "This is the abomination," she said to her officers. "This pale, pathetic thing, I will crush it myself." She prepared to give the order to fire. 30 warships aimed their weapons at a single dragon. It should have been over in seconds. But's violet eyes began to glow. The universe spoke to him, and he spoke back. Every missile that launched from the ships suddenly changed direction. They curved away from and flew in circles, chasing nothing. Every laser that fired bent around him like water flowing around a stone. Every targeting computer showed impossible readings, locking onto ghost images that did not exist. And then breathed. His white fire swept across the fleet, not burning but freezing. Engines locked in place. Weapons systems shut down. Power failed across ship after ship as cold beyond cold crept through their hulls. In less than a minute, 30 warships were helpless. Commander stood frozen in shock. This was not possible. No dragon could do what she had just witnessed. No creature in the galaxy had this kind of power. Flew to her command ship and stopped outside her window. He was close enough that she could see every detail of his silver scales, every shift of color in his cosmic eyes. When he spoke, his voice filled her mind with terrible clarity. "You threw me to the void answered." Could not move, she could not speak, she could only listen. "Tell your elders that the void touched returns. Tell them I am no longer weak. Tell them that I have learned something they never understood. Strength is not just the power to destroy. It is also the power to choose not to destroy." He turned away from her ship. "I am letting you live. Remember that. Remember that mercy exists. And remember that if you ever threaten these people again, I will not be so gentle." The frozen ships drifted in space as returned to the wandering moon. The crowd on Terminus 7 watched through the windows, unable to believe what they had seen. A dragon had fought for them. A dragon had protected them. On every station, on every planet, on every ship in the galaxy, people watched the footage and asked themselves the same question. What did this mean for the future? The answer was simple. Everything was about to change. The Empire did not accept defeat easily. They had conquered half the galaxy through fire and fury. They had made entire species bow before them. And now, one small dragon had humiliated their greatest warrior in front of the entire universe. Emperor woke from his 1,000-year sleep. Deep in the burning heart of in a chamber of black stone that had existed since before humans learned to make fire, the ancient dragon opened his eyes. He was larger than any living, his scales so dark they seemed to swallow light. His claws had torn apart planets. His fire had burned away the atmosphere of worlds that dared to resist. He had slept because there was nothing left that required his attention. The empire ran itself. His generals conquered new territories without his guidance. He had grown bored with a universe that offered no challenge. But now something had changed. Something had embarrassed his people. Something needed to die. "Bring me the recordings," he commanded, and his servants rushed to obey. He watched the footage of Terminus 7 in silence. He saw Commander's fleet rendered helpless. He saw the small silver dragon speaking words of mercy to his enemies. He saw humans cheering as if they had won a great victory. His rage was cold and deep, like the space between stars. "Summon all fleets," he ordered. "Every dragon of fighting age will answer the call. We will find this abomination and everyone who stands with it, and we will erase them from existence." 300 war fleets mobilized across the galaxy. It was the largest force ever assembled. Thousands of warships, hundreds of elder dragons, millions of soldiers ready to die for the glory of their emperor. They moved toward human space like a tide of fire and death. But the emperor had miscalculated. He thought the galaxy would cower before his power. He thought other species would abandon the humans to save themselves. He thought that fear was stronger than hope. He was wrong. On a distant world covered in endless forests, they received the news of what had done. They were an insect species, small and weak by galactic standards, that had conquered them centuries ago and used them as slaves ever since. They had never dared to resist. But now, hidden deep beneath their forests, the leaders gathered to discuss something that felt like madness. "If we help the humans, they will destroy us," one leader said. "They are already destroying us," another replied. "They work us until we die. They take our children for their armies. At least this way we die fighting." They voted to send supplies and information to the human resistance. It was not much, but it was something. It was hope. On a planet of endless oceans, they made a similar choice. They were aquatic creatures who had managed to stay neutral in most galactic conflicts by hiding beneath their seas. But neutrality had not protected them from taxation, demands, cruelty. "The dragon showed mercy," their high speaker announced. "No has ever shown mercy. Perhaps there is another way to live in this galaxy. Perhaps we have been afraid for too long." They opened their ports to human ships seeking refuge. They shared their knowledge of fleet movements. They took a side for the first time in their history. Even the AI collective of the Outer Rim took notice. These machine intelligences had existed for millions of years, watching organic species rise and fall without ever interfering. But something about interested them. "The anomaly demonstrates statistical improbability," their representative reported. "Probability of a dragon developing these abilities, near zero. Probability of such a dragon being rescued by a human, near zero. Probability of them forming a bond that changes both, near zero. And yet it happened. This is worth observing. This may be worth protecting." They did not promise direct help, but they stopped helping the track's movements. Sometimes, doing nothing was its own form of resistance. And then there were the humans. When the news of the mobilization reached human space, most people expected their leaders to surrender. The human fleet was small compared to the armada. Human technology was weaker. Human dragons did not exist. How could they possibly fight an empire that had been conquering worlds since before humans left their home planet? Captain Lee of the battleship Indomitable had a different opinion. She was a tall woman with short hair and a face marked by too many battles. She had lost her ship during the border wars and spent 3 years as a prisoner before escaping. Every day of those 3 years, she had promised herself that one day she would make them pay. "We cannot win this war through strength," she told the assembly of human military leaders. "We know that, they know that, but winning isn't the only thing that matters." Admiral listened carefully. He was an old man who had lost his family when they burned his home colony. For years, he had carried hatred in his heart like a stone, but watching the footage of showing mercy to Commander had cracked something inside him. "What are you suggesting?" he asked. "I'm suggesting we fight anyway," replied. "Not because we'll win, but because some things are worth fighting for even if you lose. That dragon could have destroyed those ships. He didn't. He showed the galaxy that power doesn't have to mean cruelty. If we abandon him now, what does that say about us?" The debate lasted for hours. Some argued for negotiation. Some argued for hiding. Some argued that one dragon was not worth the lives of millions of humans. But in the end, they voted to fight. Word went out across human space. Volunteers wanted. The response was overwhelming. Veterans who had sworn never to fly again climbed back into their ships. Civilians with no military training showed up at recruitment centers, asking how they could help. Factories that had been shut down for decades fired up their machines to build new weapons, new ships, new hope. On the wandering moon, watched the reports with mixed emotions. He had never wanted any of this. He had just wanted to save one small creature from dying alone in the cold. Now millions of people were preparing to die because of his choice. Sensed his turmoil and came to stand beside him. "You are troubled," the dragon said. "I'm scared," admitted. "Not for myself, for everyone else. All these people are risking everything because I couldn't leave you behind." Was quiet for a moment. He had grown so much since those early days when he could barely speak into his mind. Now his presence filled entire rooms. His power had grown beyond anything either of them had imagined. But inside, in the core of his being, he was still the small dragon who had been thrown away by everyone except one kind man. "You taught me something important," finally said. "You taught me that strength means protecting those who cannot protect themselves. I did not understand before. You taught me that strength means domination, that power exists only to crush those beneath you. But you showed me another way." He turned his great head to look directly at. His violet eyes filled with cosmic light. "These people are not fighting because of you. They are fighting because of what you represent. The idea that kindness matters. The belief that one person's compassion can change the universe. That is worth fighting for, Father." It was the first time had called Father. The word hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Reached out and placed his hand on the dragon's silver scales. "When did you get so wise?" "I had a good teacher." Outside, the human fleet continued to gather. Ships arrived from every corner of their territory. They were not enough to defeat the army. Everyone knew that. But they came anyway, because sometimes hope was stronger than fear. And continued to change. The cosmic energy he had touched at Terminus 7 had awakened something deep inside him. Every day, his power grew. Every night, he dreamed of distant stars and heard whispers from the edge of the universe. Something vast and ancient was calling to him, offering him strength beyond anything they had ever possessed. He did not know what he was becoming, but he knew it was necessary. The final battle was coming. The Emperor would arrive with all his fury and all his fire, and when he did, would be ready. Not to conquer, not to destroy, but to show the entire galaxy that there was another way to be strong. The shattered nebula stretched across space like the wound of a dying god. Ancient stars had exploded here millions of years ago, leaving behind clouds of glowing gas and fields of broken rock that drifted forever in the darkness. It was a graveyard of worlds, a place where nothing lived and nothing grew. Emperor chose it as the site of humanity's destruction. 5,000 warships emerged from faster-than-light travel, filling the void with their terrible presence. 50 elder dragons flew alongside them, each one large enough to swallow a human shuttle whole. The Emperor himself led the formation, his black scales making him look like a whole in reality, a shadow given form and fury. Against them stood the human fleet and their unlikely allies. Captain Lee commanded from the bridge of the Indomitable. Her ships numbered only 800, a pathetic force compared to the Armada. But they had something they did not expect. They had allies who had spent centuries studying their enemies, learning their weaknesses, waiting for this moment. And they had. The silver dragon flew at the front of the human formation. He had grown to the size of a small battlecruiser now, his wings spanning hundreds of meters. His scales reflected the light of the nebula in shifting patterns of silver and violet and colors that had no name. His eyes burned with the light of distant galaxies. Emperor saw him and felt something he had not felt in 10,000 years. Doubt. This was not the pathetic hatchling that had been cast into the void. This was something else entirely, something that the universe itself seemed to recognize and fear. But the Emperor was too proud and too angry to retreat. He had brought the greatest army in galactic history. He would not turn back because of one strange dragon and a handful of human ships. Surrender the abomination, his voice boomed across all frequencies. Surrender him, and your deaths will be quick. Resist, and I will teach your species the true meaning of suffering. His response was broadcast from the wandering moon, now flying among the human warships. We don't abandon family. The Emperor roared with rage, and the battle began. The fleet surged forward like a tide of fire. Their weapons lit up the nebula with streams of plasma and missiles. Elder dragons opened their great mouths and unleashed flames that could melt steel at 1,000 kilometers. The human fleet did not try to match them strength for strength. Instead, they scattered, using the debris of the shattered nebula as cover. They fought like survivors, like people who had learned that cleverness was as important as power. Small ships darted between asteroids, drawing fire away from larger vessels. Pilots who knew they would die flew directly into enemy formations, creating chaos before their ships exploded. They sent suicide drones loaded with explosives they had been hiding for centuries. They jammed communications with techniques they had developed in secret. Even the AI collective helped, feeding false sensor data to enemy ships through hidden in their systems. It was not enough. There were too many, too powerful, too ancient in the ways of war. For every ship they lost, they destroyed 10 of the Allied fleet. Elder dragons tore through human formations like wolves through sheep. The Emperor himself had not even joined the battle yet. He watched from the rear, waiting for the moment when he would crush the last resistance with his own claws. On the Indomitable, Captain watched her fleet dying and felt despair creeping into her heart. Then began to transform. The cosmic energy he had been gathering since Terminus 7 reached its peak. His body began to glow, silver light pouring from between his scales. His eyes became windows to infinity, revealing stars being born and stars dying across billions of light years. He rose above the battle, and the universe held its breath. "I am sorry," he said to through their bond. "I do not know what I will become, but I know that I must do this." "I know," replied, "I trust you." Closed his eyes. When he opened them again, he was no longer a dragon. His body dissolved into pure light, then reformed into something beyond comprehension. Wings that could wrap around planets. A body that stretched across the width of the nebula. Eyes that contained the birth and death of universes. He had become what the ancient once before they forgot how to believe in anything greater than themselves. He had become the cosmic tyrant. But he was not a tyrant of conquest or cruelty. He was a tyrant of mercy, shaped by human hands, guided by human love. When he spoke, every mind in the galaxy heard him, from the smallest child on the most distant colony to the ancient emperor floating among his warships. "I could destroy you all." The words were not a threat. They were simply a statement of fact. Everyone who heard them knew it was true. The being that had become was beyond weapons, beyond armies, beyond anything the universe had ever seen. "I have that power now. I could end the empire in a single thought. I could burn every ship, silence every mind, erase every trace of your existence. No one could stop me." Emperor felt fear for the first time in his eternal life. His ancient heart, which had beaten through the rise and fall of civilizations, stuttered in his chest. This was true power. This was what he had always sought but never found. And it was in the hands of the creature he had ordered thrown away like garbage. "But my father taught me that true strength is not domination. It is protection. True power is not conquest. It is mercy." turned his infinite attention to the fleet, to the emperor who had ruled through fear for so long. You threw away your weak. You cast out those who did not fit your vision of strength, and in doing so you created me, not as your destroyer but as your teacher. With a gesture that spanned light years, he ended the battle. Every weapon in the nebula fell silent, locked by his will. Missiles froze in space. Lasers bent away from their targets. The great fire of the elder dragons turned to harmless light and scattered among the stars. Then did something that shocked everyone watching. He healed. Damaged ships on both sides found their hulls restored. Wounded soldiers felt their injuries mending. The vessels that had been destroyed were rebuilt, their crews alive again as if death had never touched them. Even Emperor, ancient and tired beyond measure, felt centuries of weariness lift from his bones. "I could rule you," said. "I could force you to change, but that is not the lesson I learned. Change that comes from fear is meaningless. Only change that comes from understanding has any value." He spoke directly to the Emperor now, to the being who had ordered his death before he had even taken his first breath. "Go home. Rethink everything you believe about strength and weakness. I will not destroy you. I will not conquer you, but I will be watching, and I will be hoping that one day you will understand what I was taught." He paused, and when he spoke again, there was something almost sad in his voice. "One human saved me when your entire empire threw me away. Think about what that means. Think about what you have lost by believing that only the strong deserve to live. And think about what you might gain by learning to be kind." The fleet did not retreat. They simply stopped. For the first time in their history, they had nothing to say, nothing to do. Their emperor floated among them, staring at the cosmic being that had once been a dying hatchling in a frozen cargo bay. And slowly, one by one, they turned their ships toward home. The battle was over. The war was over. Everything had changed. In the years that followed, the galaxy transformed. The empire did not collapse, but it evolved. Some resisted the change, clinging to old ways of cruelty and conquest. But others, especially the young, began to question the traditions that had defined their species for so long. They had seen a show mercy. They had seen a protect enemies instead of destroying them. They had seen another way to be strong. Became a guardian of the cosmos, watching over all species without favoring any. He prevented wars before they started. He protected the weak from the powerful. He appeared whenever someone needed help, a silver light against the darkness between stars. But he always returned too. The old captain retired to a small colony world with a garden and a view of the stars. He grew vegetables and told stories to the children who came to visit the man who had changed history. He was happy in a way he had never expected to be. Sometimes, when the night was clear, a shadow would pass across the moons. A shape too large to comprehend, wings that blocked out entire constellations, and would smile and wave, knowing that his son had come to check on him. Humans wrote new legends about this time. They spoke of how their species, so young and small in the cosmic scale, had changed the destiny of the galaxy not through weapons or conquest, but through a single act of kindness. They had found a dying dragon in a frozen cargo bay. They had wrapped him in a jacket and carried him home. And nothing was ever the same. The inscription on the memorial to the first contact, built 300 years later on New Sol, read simply, "Humanity's greatest weapon was never fire or steel, it was compassion." And somewhere among the stars, a silver dragon smiled.